but we are going to start on time. So welcome to the ninth session of our year-long experiment in living as if this year is our last. I'm glad to see everyone here, and I hope that you'll find today's session useful. So we're getting closer and closer to dying. We have fewer than 4 months left in this experiment. And as I started doing last month, I'm going to be reminding you, probably somewhat annoyingly so, of how much time is left to live and asking you what remains for you still to do before you die in December. So remember, you have 3.5 months left to live. What remains undone? So as is our practice, we'll start with a minute of meditation to fully arrive for our gathering. So as always, please start by either closing your eyes or taking on a soft gaze that doesn't focus on anything in particular. And as always, please check your posture to ensure a balance between comfort and alertness. Okay, there's the chat from Dorothy. Okay. And as you sit in comfort, please bring your attention to your breath as it moves in and out of your body. And focus on the breath in whatever way you can, whatever way works for you, so that you can follow the movement of the breath, so that you can follow the inhale. You may notice that there is a bit of a gap between the inhale and the exhale, and then so that you can notice the exhale. And again, you may notice that in the natural rhythm of your breath, there's a gap between the exhale and the inhale. And try not to lose focus during those gaps. It's easy to do. So now take 3 deep breaths, noticing each moment of the inhale as you breathe in deeply, and each moment of the exhale as you breathe out. And after 3 deep breaths, allow the breath to return to its natural rhythm. And now we're going to do a bit of a guided meditation. Imagine that you have just died, that life has just left the body. Who is there and what is happening for them? But more importantly, what is happening to what remains of what you were? What's it like to imagine the body without life? So please stay with these images for the next minute or so. Imagining the body without life. If the attention drifts away, gently bring it back to these images. And in about a minute, I'll chime to end the meditation. So again, welcome. And now I'm going to light the candle in the Saging International tradition of beginning events. I have a new system for lighting candles. My dear husband thought this might be a better idea than matches. So we'll see how it works. And I light this candle to symbolize the wisdom in each of us and the wisdom in all of us. And now our traditional quick reminders that we begin the meetings with. Please remember to raise your digital hand to speak in the whole group so that I can see you, and to mute yourself unless you're speaking. Please keep your camera on as much as possible. Please change your name on Zoom now, if necessary, so that we know who you are. And please contact Georgiana and Diane by sending them a chat if you're having technological problems. So here's a poem for our work together today. It's called Threshold, and it's by Newton Smith. It has happened. You thought you had some control of your life and that you were in a place you understood, in a time that moved from a past you knew to a future that followed in a more or less straight line. But here you are at the edge of a shore, the shallow waves washing over your feet, taking the sand you stand on away, and suddenly you wonder if all the ground beneath you is disappearing. You have stepped through the threshold, the door closed and locked behind you. You are on the other side. You try to forget it, distract yourself, but nothing works. You check your messages. The doctor's office left a number on your phone. Is it a blood test result, survival rate for treatment, or days left to live? Now you are alone. After the panic subsides, you stand there looking around. Everything is fresh. Colors are vivid. You can smell scents, and your hearing is sharp. You feel the breeze on your skin and the tickle of hairs moving across your brow. You are pierced through with the inexplicable joy at having nothing. The sand forms around your foot, and the water wipes out all traces of your path. Everywhere you turn, there is something new, and the space around you holds you gently as it spills out and becomes a part of the expanding world. So many things are remarkable now. Here is the freedom that always frightened you. You have forgotten your name, and it does not matter. Okay, so we'll now move into breakout rooms for your check-in. As always, although we share a slide suggesting topics for discussion, please feel free to share as you feel moved. This is your time to share whatever will serve you best in your Year to Live practice. So here's the slide with those suggestions. How did this Year to Live practice go for the past month? Anything from the monthly practice resonate with or strike you? Anything from the reading resonate with or strike you? And Georgiana will put these also into the chat, which will go with you into your breakout rooms. And just as a reminder, the reading for this month was chapters 27 through 30. And the monthly practice was add sweeping meditation in order to fully inhabit the body. Consider how the body will be disposed of. Examine how to sweep up after yourself. Discuss the nature of the impermanent. often uncomfortable body into which we have incarnated. Add cemetery meditation to your basic practice for a month. And in your journal, inquire into the nature of being and becoming. Okay. And we've been doing this for 9 months now, so I'm sure there aren't any, but are there any questions about the check-in? Okay.
Ruby, could I
Yeah.
interrupt a moment? We have someone who's labeled themselves iPhone, and we won't know how to put them in a group unless they can relabel themselves.
Okay, so if your name is currently appears as iPhone, please change it to your name, especially corresponding to the alphabetical list, so that we know who you are and what room to put you in, unless you're able to put yourself in. Judith.
Hi, Ruby. Earlier in the year, you had mentioned that we were going to have some guest speakers later on towards the end of the year, and I just wondered about that.
I don't remember doing that. And
Okay,
I don't have plans actually for guest speakers. But if I can come up with any in the next few months, thank you for the reminder.
sure.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay. So Diane is going to open the breakout rooms in a minute. And as always, um, okay, what's Rain's telling me? If we have ideas for guest speakers, we should share them with Ruby. Yes, please. If you have ideas for guest speakers, email me. That would be great. Okay, so, and I'm sure that you'll remember that when Diane opens the breakout rooms, you'll see a pop-up on your screen with a list of rooms by number. If you don't see the pop-up, click on the three dots above More on the extreme right of your Zoom toolbar, and then on breakout rooms, and the list should pop up on your screen, and you'll be able to join your room. And Diane and Georgiana are here to help you should there be any problems or glitches. So please remember to click on the blue button with the number of your group. And if you make a mistake, Diane and Georgiana can move you into the correct group. Oh, okay, Becky, thank you. Becky may be iPhone. Okay, any questions? Okay, Diane, please open the breakout rooms. And we'll see you again in 20 minutes. I hope you had a enjoyable and fruitful time in your breakout groups. And I just wondered if anything noteworthy came up that you might like to share with the big group.
Ruby, can you hear me?
Yes, Susan, thank you.
Yeah, so
You are connected to
good.
audio.
I took a course recently. I wasn't able to be connected at all, so I'm really happy to get on.
Yes, I know about that, and I feel
Oh,
really,
yeah.
really bad that you weren't able to take it.
Me too. Maybe if they offer it again. I don't know why it wasn't recorded.
All I know is that they wanted the facilitators thought that recording might inhibit people from really deep and intimate sharing, and it was a small group,
Oh,
and so they wanted that.
okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. June.
I had a question. I didn't understand one of the assignment questions, which was how to sweep up after the self. What does that mean?
All I can say is I think it probably means different things for different people. When I saw it, I also thought, well, that's interesting. What does that mean? And I think it's in terms of what are you leaving for other people to have to take care of after you die? So, what can you sweep up now while you're still here so that other people don't have to? That was my take
So
on
kind
it.
of practicalities, it sounds like.
Yeah, but even emotional unfinished business, yeah, whatever other people would have to deal with. And that could be relationship as well as practical.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Rains.
Thank you, Ruby. I love the breakouts and the opportunity to meet people with different experiences. Uh, and in particular, because of my focus and what brought me to staging, I have some blind spots, and so I was delighted to learn of Cynthia Borgio and her work on conscious aging, and bring together Gurdjieff and Christian practices. And it's like, ooh, it's somebody else working on the edges, putting these pieces together. I'll throw the link in chat, but it looks like a relevant resource. And I've spoken.
Ah, and we have heard. Thank you,
Yeah.
Rains. And yeah, I am working on the resource list, by the way, and I do hope to send an initial draft of it out um, before our next meeting. So I will try to include that. Judy.
Yes, hi. At the very end, one of us shared that we talked about the Dia de los Muertos coming up, and she shared that she had heard about another way of thinking about that death and so on is the image of God Mother Death as opposed to the Grim Reaper. So I thought that just blew my mind for a moment. Oh, right. God Mother Death, who joins you at your birth and mothers you through your death.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's forget about the Grim Reaper.
Yeah. Yeah, thank
And
you.
I've spoken.
And we have heard. Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's well worth considering the images that we do carry and hold and how they influence us and condition us in our attitudes and beliefs. So thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So today we're going to talk about what happens after death and what we want to happen after we die. And in chapter 33, which you'll read for next month, Stephen Levine poses this question: would you prefer cremation or burial, to go up in flames or down in moisture? Have you considered the body being laid out on a mountain ledge for what is called a vulture or sky burial? So today we're going to spend some time talking about what we want to happen after we die. But a caveat. Ultimately, of course, we can only do so much to make sure that what we want to happen with our corpse or anything else that takes place after our death is actually what happens. For a fairly extreme example of an attempt to control from beyond the grave, you can watch a video about Queen Victoria's instructions on what would happen after her death on YouTube. And I'm going to send that link out with the link to the recording of this session. She dictated a list of what had to be put into her coffin. She also decreed that she would not be embalmed, which I found quite interesting for that time. She was Queen Victoria, so they followed her every command. But there's only one Queen Victoria. So, and I also want to thank Georgiana. She was the one who told me about the video, and it's entertaining watching. So, like Victoria, we can express our wishes to our loved ones formally or informally. We can even prepay for whatever form of disposition of the remains we prefer, whatever kind of service we may want. But keep in mind that at that point, we are dead, and whatever happens to the corpse or anything else is well beyond our control. Our loved ones can disregard our wishes. So the question is, are you okay with knowing that ultimately what happens after we die is out of our control? And I'd just like to take a minute for each of us to sit with that question. Okay, and it might be worth some reflection in this coming month. I also want to point out that there may be cultural or religious considerations that are important to acknowledge, even if one chooses not to follow them. For example, Reb Zalman, as a religious Jew, could only be buried and under specific rules. For example, burial had to take place before Sabbath, if possible, in a simple pine box with no metal in it. Under Jewish law, cremation is strictly prohibited. But after visiting Auschwitz, Reb Zalman declared that he was going to be cremated. And this was in solidarity, basically, with the people who had died at Auschwitz. That set off a furor in his community, among the religious Jewish community. And he later changed his mind, actually, and he was buried. But it's important to consider what may be influencing our choices and the effect of our choices on others. So after death, what do you want to happen? Hopefully by now, you've considered what you'd like to have happen to the body once life has left it. But here are some considerations. Some of us may choose organ donation or leaving our body to a medical educational organization for the benefit of future medical practitioners. We may want a service, such as a funeral, a memorial, a wake, depending on, again, on your choices and your culture. When would it happen? It could happen at the time of disposition. It could happen before. More and more people are planning pre-death memorial services that they actually attend, or at some other time. And where is it going to take place? And we're going to talk more next month about things like services, about how we want to be remembered. Will there be a viewing of the corpse, the famous, well-known open casket, or not? How do you want your remains disposed of? And we're going to talk about this more in detail. How is it all going to be paid for? And what if your loved ones disagree with your choices? After we die, what's left is usually referred to as a corpse or bodily remains. It might be worth considering what exactly we think it is. What once we considered to be ourselves no longer has life or consciousness. So what do we want done with it? So here are some options, and you may know of others. In the United States, the most common form of disposition of remains was burial, but the trend seems to be away from it now. And I think cost and environmental reasons are part of that. In 2021, the National Funeral Directors Association projected the burial rate to be 36.6%, as opposed to the expected rate of cremation of 57.5%. And according then to the National Funeral Directors Association's 2023 cremation and burial report, the burial rate was projected to go down by about 2% to 34.5%, and the cremation rate was projected to rise by almost 3% to 60.5%. A body that's buried is, of course, put in the ground or possibly into a mausoleum. But how that happens can also vary. These days, there are basically two types of burial, traditional and green. A traditional burial takes place in a graveyard with the almost always embalmed remains in a coffin. For green burials, according to the website greenburialcouncil.org, there is no embalming, there are no liners or vaults, and biodegradable containers are used, whether they're caskets, shrouds, or nothing at all. And I also know about green burial that sometimes you can be buried with the seeds for something to grow, like a tree. So that can also be part of green burial. And as you now know, the trend is away from burial toward cremation. One factor is cost. Cremation is generally a lot cheaper than burial. The main question with cremation is what happens to the ashes, apart from any sort of religious or cultural considerations about whether to burn a body. With burial, the disposition is complete when the body is put into the ground. But with cremation, the ashes are returned to the loved ones and then need to be disposed of. We can let our loved ones know if we have somewhere we want the ashes to be distributed. But again, ultimately, it is up to them. Although the slide depicts cremation by fire, the most commonplace and traditional still, there are actually two kinds of cremation, fire and water. I once had the privilege of accessing the burning site along the Ganges River in India, and I was able to watch a body burn. We got there just as they were lighting the fire, and they allowed us to stay there until the body had completely burnt. It's quite fascinating to actually watch a body burn, to watch like facial elements dissolve and watch. Okay, I won't say any more, but it was quite fascinating. But cremation by fire actually has a large environmental impact, both when the burning happens and when the ashes are distributed. And there may be bone fragments in among the ashes if the remains are not completely burned, as often happens. On the other hand, the scientific name for aqua or water cremation is alkaline hydrolysis. It's the same process that occurs as part of nature's course when a body is laid to rest in the soil, if it's not embalmed and it is not enclosed, except that a combination of water flow, temperature, and alkalinity is used to accelerate nature's own process. The result of water cremation is a fine sand with no fragments, and the environmental impact is actually almost nothing. So, although the bodily remains of 98% of people in the United States are either buried or cremated, there are some other options, some non-traditional forms of disposition of bodily remains, which include the following. Whether they are available depends on where you die. So the notion of sky or vulture burial, this is quite common in Tibet and other Asian Buddhist cultures. But as far as I could tell, it is still illegal in the United States, although I had once heard that it is available in Colorado. According to Wikipedia, it is a funeral practice in which a corpse is placed on a mountaintop to decompose while exposed to the elements or to be eaten by scavenging animals, especially carrion birds like vultures or corvids. Another non-traditional method of the disposition of human remains is called human composting or terramation. It's the process to transform human remains into soil, especially fertile soil, which is then used as you would any other type of compost. As of last year, it was legal in Arizona, California, Colorado, Delaware, Maryland, Minnesota, Maine, Nevada, New York, Oregon, Vermont, and the state of Washington. So we're now going to go into breakout rooms to talk about what you want to happen after you die. And if it comes up, your own comfort level with knowing that it may not be what actually happens. So here are some questions to help the discussion, and Georgiana will also put them in the chat to take into the breakout room with you. What do I want to happen immediately after I die? Organ donation, gifts of remains to a medical school. There we go. If I'm not donating the remains, or after the donee is finished with them, how do I want them to be disposed of? By burial, cremation, something else? How will it all be paid for? And what if my loved ones disagree? So once we open the breakout rooms, you'll have, again, 20 minutes to talk about your own thoughts and hopes. And Diane will open the breakout rooms now, and Georgiana will announce when we're halfway through. And unlike our first breakout room, you should all go automatically into the breakout room you were in. So Diane, please open the rooms. Everybody's back. We do have a bit of time to hear from you all, so I'll be curious to hear anything people want to share. There was something in the chat about body liquidification. That is synonymous with water cremation or aqua cremation. It's the same thing. I also want to remind you that because there were lots of notes in the chat about requirements, so this is heavily regulated, and what can happen really depends on where you live. There's a lot of control by state law. There's, I think, even some federal laws around this stuff. So it can vary from state to state, and it does vary widely from state to state and country to country. And it also varies depending on what the funeral industry where you live allows, what they not allows, but what they make available. So, for example, funeral directors are becoming aware that more and more people want green types of burial, and graveyards as well are becoming aware of that and making provision for that. So you really need, if there's something in particular that you know you want, you really need to check it out and make sure that it's allowed. Yeah. So would anyone like to share from whatever arose in your breakout rooms? Susan, and then June. You're muted.
I was telling them two funny stories. One of them was this woman, she lived in New York and her dog died. So she called the Humane Society and she said, "What do I do with my dog?" And they said, "Bring it down to us, we'll take care of it." So she put it in a suitcase. She got on the subway. Somebody came over and said, "Little lady, that's too heavy for you. Let me hold it." And they stole it.
Oh my gosh. By the way, disposition of pet corpse remains is also regulated, just so you know. So thank you, Susan. That's great. She didn't have to worry about it. Okay, June.
I just wanted to say how chipper everybody in our group was. This topic was definitely already fully considered, plans made. Some of them, I don't think Allison likes to share, but some of them very beautiful and creative. And I don't know, everybody's into it. Not a lot of reluctance.
Great. Good. I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah. Sometimes it's a subject that can be studiously avoided. So I'm really glad to hear that. Martina.
Yeah, rich conversation in our group also. But I just wanted to say, that I know the conversation is around how we like in our body disposed. And it's just, I wanted to highlight, like in Ireland, cremation is very, very small percentage, and the burial and the funeral and the ritual and the community that with the dying process, that a huge part of supporting the living who are left behind is, when we die, we have 2 night wakes at home, and the community come with food, there's plenty of alcohol and fun and singing and celebrating the life. Usually it is the typical funeral, but it is about it's community and the celebration of life that is part of, and then whatever the cremation and that. But I just wanted to highlight the community part of dying.
Yeah, thank you. I grew up in Orthodox Judaism, and there is the week after the funeral called Sitting Shiva. And it sounds very similar, except for the celebration part. They tended to be somewhat grim, but there was that really strong community aspect to it, and the neighbors and community coming together to support the family, the grieving family, and a way to share it in community. So thank you. And thank you also, Martina, for the reminder that, what we've been talking about has been mostly United States centric. And again, there are different methods, there are different ideas, depending on the context we find ourselves in. So thank you. Tom.
Well, I just spent 3 weeks. My granddaughters are on the coast, seeing my three best friends flying like, 5,000-6,000 miles to do that in 3 weeks. But I got to Mexico, and one of my really good Rotary friends, previous husband, had died. And so I got to totally experience that. And we all kind of dress up and stuff, whereas they are like if they came out of the field. So they also they don't embalm, and they keep the body 24 hours, maybe 36. And, family that's right there, they sort of sleep on couches, and they just have a complete group thing going on. And then, the anyway, the thing that happens at the mess. But I think in general, what I wanted to say was that this, considering what to do with the remains, just totally blew my mind how important that was. This is the first time I got it in this course. Even though I don't think that the body is where it is, and what actually dies and all that kind of stuff, but it rolled over me like a truck or something to actually be considering this part, which is sort of interesting in and of itself. I'm not sure why or how. Anyway, I've spoken.
And we have heard. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think in a way, I think it was June had asked at the beginning about sweeping up after yourself. I think this is part of actually sweeping up after yourself. Um, what happens to this once there's no longer life? Yeah, thank you. Nancy.
Well, we had an interesting conversation in our group. I found. And I think the end result that I had, I don't know how the others felt, but they seem to agree with me, is that really what happens to my body in the end is not, it really, I don't really care. My husband is going to have to deal with it, and I do, I help him, and whatever I can do now. But the fact is that neither one of us really care that much about it. What I really care about is how I feel right now, and what I do with my life while I'm alive. I think all of this is very important to consider. It's not like I haven't, but at this point, really, I really feel very clear that it's brought up thoughts about what it is I feel right now: the fear, the concern, the love, the peace, the not peace at the moment. And that's where I am with it. And we have a beautiful little group, I think, and I really appreciated the input that I experienced with Nancy and Echo. It's very moving. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, and what I try to do is put these things out there so that each person um, has this experience for themselves in the way that really works for them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We are
And
all so
so
different. And
I appreciate hearing, Nancy, that, disposition of remains,
yeah,
I'm dead. What do I
yeah,
care?
truly, I'm not gonna care.
Um, yeah, but what's important is what choices am I making right now in my life about how I live it.
Yeah, that's so
So,
important. Yeah. Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you. Barbara.
In our group, one individual was sharing about watching this series called Bones. And I haven't ever seen it myself, but it starts with a dead body. But what it made me think of, and I just thought I'd offer this as, when you list out the different choices people might make about what happens to their body, I watched a documentary, and I think it was called The Body Farm. So this was individuals who donated their bodies for scientific study, where their remains may be laid out in the open or in different types of contexts, but specifically for the study of, really for forensic science, how long it takes how a body might decompose, under what temperatures, what conditions, the insects that may lay eggs within the body, how long they have been there or hatched or whatever, that really contributes to forensic science. So I thought you could add that to your list of things. I haven't gone online to see if that body farm still exists, but it was interesting. It's much like donating your body to medical science to further the understanding of things.
Yeah.
So I've spoken.
And we have heard. Yeah, thank you. I'll try to find it. Um, yeah, it's always interested me, this notion of that they can tell um, when a person has died by things like, the maggots, whether they're still there or they're in a larval stage, or, um, yeah, um, how far decomposition has gone given the environment in which the body is found. And yeah, I watched a few episodes of Bones, and it was interesting. Yeah. There's another television series. Actually, Georgiana, Diane, and I were talking about this while you all were in breakout room, called 6 Feet Under. I think it's on Netflix now. It's very quirky, but it gives you a bit of a sense of the funeral industry, and what that's like. And of course, it's a soap opera with relationships and all that kind of stuff. But if you're interested, and there's also one in the UK called Silent Witness. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Georgiana. Deb, and then we're going to need to close.
I'll be brief. There's an author, Mary Roach, who writes a series of interesting books. Her book called Stiff has to do with everything to do you could possibly imagine about death and dying. I listened to it on a road trip, and she covered disposition of the remains very well. But she's someone who writes. She's clever, and she's smart, and she's very thorough in her research and her work. I just think it's perfect for me at this time, the perfect time to be looking at it. So if you get a chance to take it out of a library or borrow someone's copy, I recommend it.
And it was called Stiff?
Yep, like the slang for cadaver, a stiff.
Right.
All her books have one word to them. She's quite a well-known author. You can find her Googling really easy. Mary Roach.
Yeah. Thank you. I will add it to the resource list. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so once again, I'd like to remind you that the end is getting nearer, and we only have a little more than 3 months left. So here's your reminder. You have 3.5 months left to live. What remains undone before you die? So let's go over next month's practice in reading. As always, if there's anything in these practices that doesn't fit for you, don't worry about it. You may want to come up with an alternative, you may not. Write a will, a memorial service, and an epitaph. And again, we're going to be talking about this next month. Read them to your group. Experiment with making videotapes and writing letters and poems for those who will remain behind. Watch whatever anticipatory grief arises as the year nears its end. Try Dead for a Day practice. Envision the distribution of your precious possessions. Note that some receive a place of honor while others disappear into the back of a closet. In your heart, release your belongings, and even more painfully, release your belonging, your family, friends, socially approved identity. Living consciously allows an appreciation of each thing in its time. And finally, extend letting go practice to half an hour a day. Our next meeting is October 16th. The reading for that meeting is chapters 31 through 33. And as always, we end our gathering with the blowing out of the candle and with the extinguishing of this candle. May the wisdom it represents in each of us and in all of us move out into the world. Thank you all. Another great session.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.